We're tracking developing news in the investigation into Sandra Bland's death. Tonight in New York City, the group Millions March NYC will gather in Union Square, they say, to fight for Sandra Bland. Meanwhile, the Texas Department of Public Safety is re-releasing the dash cam video of Bland's traffic stop. It comes after there were allegations that the video was edited. Officials are refuting that claim, saying they requested the FBI examine the video to ensure its integrity. But the video is leading to questions over who was right in the video when the trooper asked Bland to get out of the car and put out a cigarette. Joining me now from San Francisco is veteran prosecutor Paul Henderson. Paul, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start there and play the part of the video where the trooper asks Bland to get out of the car.
Yes.
Oh, you don't have the right.
Step out of the car.
You do not have the right to do that.
I do have the right. Now step out or I will remove you.
I refuse to talk to you other than to identify myself.
Step out or I will remove you.
So, you know, in point blank, who's in the right here?
Well, it's difficult to answer that question. It depends on who's evaluating that. Now, it seems like the first question that you're going to ask is, well, what was the officer's intention? Keep in mind that this was just a stop, and he had already made the decision that he was merely issuing a warning. So what was the purpose of having her step out of the car? If he can answer that question and defend his actions by saying he felt unsafe, that he was in danger or others were in danger, I think that's a very difficult question to answer in the context where we see the video. It doesn't appear like he felt in danger or anyone else was in danger by the cigarette, or that she wasn't answering or responding to his directives in terms of collecting her identification, giving her a citation. I think that's a very difficult question to ask, and I don't think you're going to get a black and white answer, although it appears from the video that the officer himself was subjectively escalating this encounter inappropriately, and that led to these tragic results.
Right. Let's turn to the investigation for a moment, and in particular of her death. Now, police are saying she committed suicide. Her family's questioning that and has ordered an independent autopsy. Could the police be culpable even if it turns out that it was suicide?
Absolutely, and here's why. So keep in mind there are two separate tracks in a case like this. So there's civil liability and then there's criminal liability. Now, we've already heard from the district attorney that they're investigating this death as a potential homicide or as a murder, but that means that they have a couple of options. They can pursue using their own investigators, or they can use the police investigators to make their determination, and they can make independent filing charges, or they can present a case like this to the grand jury. But what happens as a result of those findings will absolutely and could possibly influence the civil charges that could come from the family in terms of them seeking a suit against the individuals that had her in custody. How did she end up being killed while she was in custody? That is not what was expected and not what we expect from our criminal justice system when people are brought in. So there are all these questions surrounding this, and keep in mind, one of the most difficult things to answer is, how did we get to a death for someone that was stopped for a warning for an incorrect lane change? And that's why I think this case is not going to go away. It's going to continue to raise questions like this, and it's going to continue to raise debates over what are the encounters that individuals have with law enforcement, both when they're stopped on the streets and when they are in custody of a law enforcement agency.
Paul Henderson, I want you to stick around for us. We want you to weigh in on the next story that we're bringing you here, and that is the breaking news on the massacre at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. The Associated Press is reporting that suspect Dylan Roof will face federal hate crime charges. Now, according to an anonymous source from the AP, NBC News is working to confirm that information independently. We do know that Attorney General Loretta Lynch is scheduled to hold a 3 p.m. Eastern news conference. We do not know whether this is the topic of that news conference, but we will be monitoring it for you. Dylan Roof already faces 9 counts of murder in South Carolina and could face the death penalty. It's not clear at this point how federal charges will impact the state's case. So back with me again is Paul Henderson, and rejoining the discussion, Mark Claxton, director of the Black Law Enforcement Alliance. He was an NYPD officer but now lives in South Carolina. So Paul, let me start with you and talk about the significance of this. First, talk to us about the possibility of a hate crime charge.
Well, here's why it's interesting in this state is that, you know, South Carolina is one of only 5 states that does not have hate crimes. So the fact that the federal government can step in and charge independently hate crimes is interesting in and of itself. But the issue in this case is because it's a death penalty case, and keep in mind that the hate crimes allegations at a federal level are only enhancements, right? So that means so whatever sentence occurs as a foundation, these are only enhancement sentences, and that might be irrelevant in a death penalty case. And keep in mind, with a death penalty approach at the federal level, there is no death penalty. So we're talking about a matter of years and time imprisonment versus actual death penalty when we're talking about the enhancement of hate crimes at a federal level. So that's why all of this approach is very interesting. But I think what's important to note is that the federal government is stepping in even when a state is choosing to prosecute at a death penalty to say that they think that it could be important that hate crimes be charged to send a message and as a deterrent for behavior like this so that other individuals don't engage in such horrific and terrible behavior in the future. That's what I think is interesting about this case.
Yeah, and NBC can now confirm that Attorney General Loretta Lynch will have an update on the Charleston case. We're not yet sure exactly what it is, but we do know that her comments in that news conference at 3 p.m. will specifically address an update within the Charleston case. As it stands right now, it is only the AP that is reporting the hate crime charges that are expected from the federal government. Mark, let me bring you in here and ask you about the significance of a hate crime charge. You live in South Carolina. Why is this important to the people down there? What is it going to mean for the community down there, given what happened?
I think what the biggest meaning that it has is a full accountability and perhaps even a better understanding about what occurred there, the motivation behind it, the impetus for it, etc. And I think the family and the community at large deserves as much information as possible regarding the actions of Dylan Ruth as a result of the death of these 9 individuals. So I think most importantly, from a civilian or citizen model, is a fuller accountability. What the penalties will be subsequent to any federal prosecution or the enhancements, as Paul was talking about, is important. But what's most important is that people have a fuller understanding and a fuller acknowledgement about what motivated an individual to engage in this type of behavior. And I think it'll go a long way in beginning the healing process for families and the community at large.
Mark Claxton and Paul Henderson, thank you both for that update.